In the summer of 1945, Berlin was a city of broken buildings and the air smelled like smoke. A young woman named Ursula had very little food and wondered if she could survive another night. Suddenly, a jeep stopped nearby. An American soldier got out, walked over, and handed her 2 chocolate bars. She had not tasted chocolate in 3 years. This small piece of chocolate was the start of a new life that would take her across the ocean to America. By 1950, over 90,000 German women would do the same thing. They traded ruined cities for American homes and hunger for hope. How did Germany, a defeated country, send so many women to marry American soldiers? And why did American soldiers end up starting families with the same women they were told to stay away from? Imagine Germany right after the war ended. There was no mail, no milk, and very few men. The surviving German soldiers were in prison camps, if they were alive at all. The number of babies being born had dropped sharply. People in the cities were starving, living on only about 1,200 calories a day, mostly from watery soup. A can of coffee or a bar of soap was like a treasure. Then the American army arrived. The soldiers were well fed and had money. The rules said they had to keep their distance from Germans, but that was impossible. The army needed local people to clean offices, type letters, and clear roads. Contact between soldiers and German women was bound to happen. Soon it was common, and then it became personal. German women, who were now in charge of their families, learned that washing a soldier's shirt could earn them a carton of cigarettes. They could trade those cigarettes for enough potatoes to last for weeks. For many, it started with the need to survive, not with love. Officially, soldiers could be punished for getting friendly with German women. This rule was in place until December 1946. Signs outside army buildings said, "Don't fraternize," in both English and German. But a secret army survey in October 1945 showed that many soldiers were already having relationships with German women. Military police and officers often looked the other way, hoping the problem would just go away. It didn't. Letters from home couldn't replace real human company, especially from someone who looked at you with thankful eyes. The rule fell apart because it was impossible to enforce. You can't make it a crime for people to be kind to each other, especially when children were thanking soldiers just for a piece of chewing gum. So how did people start dating when they weren't even supposed to talk? It began with things, not words. A soldier might give a pack of gum to a baker's daughter. The next day, she might give him a fresh roll with a shy smile. Trading things turned into friendly talk, and friendly talk grew into sharing things like books. German girls would practice their English with soldiers, and the soldiers would learn to say, "Ich möchte dich wiedersehen," which means, "I want to see you again." The first kiss might happen in the ruins of an old building, in the moonlight. One soldier later remembered that moment clearly. He said, "She was the future, and I was Hershey's." It felt like a good trade. In a world like that, small acts of kindness meant everything. Love was part of it, but not all of it. For many women, marriage to an American soldier offered real, practical benefits. They could get an army store card, which gave them American goods. They could eat in the army dining halls, which meant regular meals. And they could live in army housing where there was heat. For women who were selling family treasures for flour, going from barely any food to 3,500 calories a day was like moving to a different world. A simple army soldier earned more money in a month than a German doctor did in half a year. On top of that, people were afraid of the Soviet army in the East. So, an American passport wasn't just a way to escape hunger. It was a ticket to safety. Men often proposed marriage after only a few dates because they knew they could be sent home at any time. Not everyone was happy about it. Some Germans who still believed in the Nazis would call these women names like Ami Liebchen, which means Yankee lover. A woman seen with an American soldier might have her home vandalized or her food ration card torn up. In one case, a woman came home to find her mother's head had been shaved as a punishment for being friendly with the enemy. It was a strange situation. People who had lost husbands in the war were now happy to see the Americans, while former Nazi party members now criticized them. Priests warned young women to be careful. But feeling ashamed was not as powerful as seeing your child go hungry. Many women decided that being judged by their neighbors was better than starving. They made a tough choice to protect their families. On December 28, 1945, President Truman signed the War Brides Act. This law allowed American soldiers to bring their foreign wives to the US, but the rules were very strict. Women had to pass health checks and prove they were of good character. The soldier also had to prove he could support her. If a woman failed any part of this process, she could be denied entry. Still, it offered a legal way to a new life. In the first 6 months, 12,000 German women were allowed into the US. By 1950, that number was over 90,000. The ships that took them to America got nicknames like the Diaper Run or Kiss Kiss Route because they were full of new mothers and babies. Many women even made wedding dresses out of old parachute silk. Each woman carried one suitcase and a dream of starting over in a safe place. When the women arrived in America, they had to get used to a new culture of shopping and having lots of things. It was overwhelming. Supermarkets had so many choices, like 20 different kinds of soap. A menu at a diner had more options than an entire German market. Some women loved the new freedom and choices, but others felt lost and homesick. They learned English from store clerks and at parents' meetings at schools. They learned that in America, "How are you?" was a greeting, not always a real question. They wrote letters home about amazing things like washing machines and neighbors who were polite to your face. They were also amazed to hear music on the radio all day without any political speeches. It was a confusing but exciting new way of life. Of course, not every story had a happy ending. Some soldiers struggled with bad memories from the war and dealt with them by drinking and being quiet. Some German women, living in the middle of nowhere far from their families, felt very lonely. The divorce rate for these couples in the 1950s was twice as high as the national average. Their children often felt caught between two worlds, not quite German and not quite American. But these families were also strong. Women who once stood in line for bread were now baking German pretzels in their American kitchens. At summer barbecues, hot dogs were cooked right next to German sausages. They mixed their cultures, putting sauerkraut on hamburgers or German Christmas decorations next to American ones. It was a messy but beautiful way of creating a new life. By 1960, there were 200,000 children from these relationships living in America. This new group of German Americans changed the country. They grew up to be politicians, teachers, and even astronauts. One of these children later became the first woman to be a 4-star general in the US Army. Another won a major prize for writing poetry. Every family that mixed German and American traditions showed that something good could come from a terrible war. They proved that people from enemy nations could become family. From 1946 to 1949, old army ships were turned into floating nurseries. Each ship left Germany with up to 1,500 brides, and on average, 35 babies were born on each trip before the ship even reached New York. The army gave the women colored ID tags to keep things organized. In a funny twist, safety drills on the ship sometimes turned into social events for the women. Announcements were made in both English and German like, "Please keep your life vest, but give away your heart." One bride said the trip was 9 days of seasickness and hope. When they finally saw the Statue of Liberty, it was a very emotional moment. The women started singing the German national anthem, then stopped and sang "America the Beautiful" instead, laughing at the strange mix of feelings. For every woman who made it to America, another woman's paperwork got stuck and her dreams were put on hold. A missing document, a suspicious tattoo, or an uncooperative officer could ruin everything. About 15,000 applications were rejected, leaving many couples heartbroken. Some soldiers even deserted the army to go back to Germany to be with the women they loved. Some women were left to raise their children alone near American army bases, never fully part of either world. Their letters, found years later, tell a sad story. One wrote, "I still wait by the gate at 5 p.m., even though the guard doesn't know my face anymore." These letters show that the numbers only tell the story of the women who made it, not the ones who were left behind. But not every woman wanted to leave Germany. For some, an American boyfriend was just for a short time. These women stayed to help rebuild their country. They helped reopen universities, fix the streets, and write the new laws for West Germany. Thanks to their hard work, Germany's economy grew very quickly, which was called the economic miracle. By 1955, these women were earning good salaries. Some kept in touch with their old American boyfriends through letters. Years later, some of the old soldiers would visit Europe as tourists and meet up with their former girlfriends. They would talk politely about the old days and part with a formal handshake that hid all the feelings about what might have been. Let's look at the numbers, because numbers tell a story all on their own. Between 1945 and 1955, more than 1.2 million American soldiers served in Germany. Out of that came something unexpected: 90,000 marriages. And from those marriages, 200,000 children. But the story didn't stop there. Those children grew up, had families of their own. By the year 2000, there were nearly 1 million descendants of these wartime unions, living proof of how history can echo across generations. The impact was so large, entire friendship groups were formed by these brides. What began as small gatherings grew into networks of more than 40,000 members, so influential they even convinced Congress to declare a national holiday, German-American Day. Yet maybe the most surprising number isn't about marriages or children, it's about public opinion. In 1950, only 30% of Americans approved of these unions. By 1970, that number soared to 78%. Why? Because people met these women. They became neighbors, co-workers, friends. And slowly, the fear faded. People realized the truth. These women weren't strangers. They were just people, like them. It didn't take long for Washington to notice. These weren't just love stories anymore. They were political gold. The US government began filming short movies, smiling German brides stepping into new homes, waving from porches, raising families under the stars and stripes. The message was clear. America was safety. America was wealth. America was the future. And across the ocean, German leaders played the same game. Letters from the brides, filled with stories of shiny kitchens, full grocery stores, and warm neighborhoods, were read aloud as proof that siding with the West meant a better life. Love had become propaganda. The brides were no longer just wives or mothers. They were symbols, living proof of an American dream, holding the promise of peace, prosperity, and a new beginning. Even today, the myths haven't gone away. The first one? That the women only wanted a ticket to America. But the Army's own surveys told a different story. Over 60% of couples said they were in love. The second myth? That soldiers married the enemy as some kind of rebellion. In reality, most of them said the same thing. They fell for a person, not a nationality. Then came the fear that these marriages would destroy discipline in the ranks. But the records don't lie. Soldiers got into far more trouble over late-night card games than they ever did over women. And the biggest myth of all? That love can't grow in a place torn apart by war. But 90,000 marriage certificates say otherwise, each one a quiet, undeniable piece of proof that even in the ruins people still found hope. 70 years later, the echoes of those love stories are still alive. Step into a quiet cafe in Germany, and you might meet Katja. Her grandmother was one of those brides who boarded a ship in 1948, leaving behind a shattered homeland for a new life in America. Decades later, Katja herself crossed the ocean, living in the US for a year. She came back changed. Today, she says she feels both German and American, even though her passport bears only one nationality. In her life, you can still see the bridge her grandmother built. And then there's Anna. Her grandfather was an African-American soldier who never abandoned the woman he loved. For 20 years, he sent money faithfully across the Atlantic, supporting Anna's grandmother and their child in Germany. Those letters and those payments built more than a home. They built a bond that could not be erased by borders. Anna grew up hearing those stories. They shaped her so deeply that she studied American history. Now she guides tours of her city. And when she stops on a certain street corner, she points to the exact spot where it all began, with a single chocolate bar handed from a soldier to a young German woman in the rubble of war. These aren't just stories about the past. They are proof that the war brides carried more than themselves across the sea. They brought back pieces of America, new foods, new music, new traditions that quietly stitched themselves into German life. Listen closely, and you'll still hear it today. In the recipes passed down through families, in the swing of jazz records that never left their homes, in the laughter of grandchildren who feel tied to two nations at once. The war brides didn't just leave, they connected worlds. They showed that even in the ruins of war, love could build bridges stronger than politics, stronger than fear, and strong enough to last for generations. History isn't just battles and treaties. Sometimes it's love letters, marriage certificates, or even a single chocolate bar passed from one hand to another. Hidden in official papers are stories of courage, heartbreak, and love that shaped the world in ways we rarely imagine. If you want to uncover more of these human stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And tell us, does your family have its own story of crossing borders for love? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with a friend, because sometimes history is not about what nations built, but about the small gestures that changed lives forever. They married because hunger left them open to trust, because in a world of rubble, the smallest act of kindness felt like a miracle, and because a single piece of chocolate could feel like a promise of something better. In the end, 90,000 women walked away from everything they had ever known. They boarded military ships, crossed oceans, and chose hope over fear. And in doing so, they helped turn two former enemies into allies. They proved something timeless, that even in the darkest hours of history, love has a way of surviving.